Welcome back to the graveyard, everybody. My name is Mads, and I just finished up the wonderful opportunity I had to go to Pennhurst. Now, when it comes to Pennhurst, most of what you see probably comes from ghost hunting videos on YouTube or shows like Ghost Adventures and Portals to Hell, things like that. I know that I am someone who was born in Detroit. I'm originally, obviously, from Michigan, and then I moved to Pennsylvania. I had never heard of Pennhurst until I moved to Pennsylvania. So I saw an opportunity to help educate people on that space because, unfortunately, just as one of our tour guides said, a lot of what you hear about Pennhurst is unfortunately misinformation. Let's face it, even if you absolutely love a ghost hunting show, which is perfectly valid, you can love whatever you want to love, they are working for production teams. They're supposed to be sensational. They're supposed to be over-the-top reactions. They're supposed to do whatever it takes to garner more views so more people watch that show over another network's show. It's just the way that it is. Whether that host wants to be over the top or not, they're just kind of put into a position where they have to be. Otherwise, the audience is going to get bored. But the unfortunate part of that, well, two parts of that, are one, because it's crammed into between a half-hour show and an hour long, you miss a lot of the important history of the spaces that they are inhabiting during those episodes. And two, because it's so over the top, it's very difficult to say what was actual paranormal activity and what was those hosts being over the top because the producer said, hey, that scene wasn't interesting enough. And that's not to shade anyone, it's just the way things are. Before I went to Pennhurst, I'd always had reservations about it. I'd always been interested in paranormal investigation because since I was 6 years old, I have had strong experiences with the paranormal. The reason I'd always had reservations about investigating specifically at Pennhurst and places like it is that it felt like it could be disrespectful. Especially since at the time I had seen the documentary Suffer the Little Children. I had seen it about a year to a year and a half before we visited Pennhurst. I knew of the disgusting atrocities people went through there. I knew that the people who were forced to live at Pennhurst were treated like less than animals. They were basically tortured to death in many cases because of eugenics, because the person who at the time had owned Pennhurst loved the person who basically created the idea of eugenics and thought it was a great idea. What I knew after watching that documentary was, well, every time I see people talk about Pennhurst, they talk about it being a haunted house that you can go through. Something fun, something that's going to make you laugh or deliberately scare you, something that you're doing for the purposes of enjoyment. And as a disabled person, I was kind of offended by that. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, how the hell can you in all good conscience make a haunted house out of a place where disabled people were treated like they were no better than dog shit? I am pleased to say, though, after going there, I understand better, and I want to make this video for the purposes of education. I want to make it for people who have both never been to Pennhurst and who had that same reservation that I did, to hopefully ease your mind and help you understand how to properly conduct yourself at Pennhurst. Because even people who had like high tickets there the weekend I was there were getting kicked out because they were being disrespectful to the spirits and disrespectful to the space they were inhabiting. I'm also making this video because I had a very different experience at Pennhurst than most people ever will. I am disabled, I have mobility problems, and I did not see a single person make a video about what it's like to go to Pennhurst as a disabled person when I was, looking into people's experiences before going myself. So I want to offer the perspective of a disabled person in a place where disabled people were treated that way. So first off, I want to show you a little bit of the footage of when we first arrived. So the first thing that they did with us was give us a tour of the facilities. They allowed us to see the exterior of the buildings during the daylight, which was nice because you could get really good photography done that way and really good videography without worrying about blinding the poor tour guide with lights and stuff. And our tour guide was extremely knowledgeable. He told us things that you see in like Supper of the Little Children, and he talked about some of the history that you can find. There were also little in-between stories that he was able to tell us that you don't find online. Things like the fact that during the tours, he has met survivors of Pennhurst who were able to actually tell him face-to-face what their experiences were like because, yes, there are several people still surviving to this day who had to live in Pennhurst and be treated like cattle because, frighteningly enough, it wasn't closed down that long ago. Our tour guide did everything in his power to humanize the people who had to live at Pennhurst, to destigmatize this idea that because the haunt is called Pennhurst Asylum, a lot of people get the wrong idea and think it means that it basically was Bedlam or Arkham or something. But even when it comes to places like Bedlam, you should have more pity than fear when it comes to those people because, again, they didn't ask for that treatment. They didn't ask for their mental health diagnoses or anything. But he was explaining that this was not an asylum. This was not a place for people with mental illness, although there could be some, overlap. It was for disabled people that had parents who didn't know what to do. Back then, there were little to no resources for the parents of disabled children as to how they could effectively care for their children. Typically, you'd have the dad, if he was around, at work all day long and then tired by the time he got home, just wanting to relax, unwind, and then go to bed. And the mother would have to stay home alone. And if you've ever worked with severely physically or mentally disabled people, you know it's generally a job for more than one person at a time.
This was originally known as the Eastern State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. We're talking about the realm of disability, my friends. We're talking people with autism, people with Down syndrome, people with cerebral palsy, people with any type of physical, developmental, or intellectual disability was housed in this place here behind us. In fact, the building right behind me was considered a low-grade cottage. What that means is the people who lived inside Mayflower were little to no speech skills. A lot of the people were nonverbal, and also a lot of the people were lower functioning.
Now, something that you just saw from my tour guide is some language that a lot of us in the disabled community knows is not typically used anymore and is not very appropriate. I want, like I said, to educate though in this video. I don't want you getting angry with him because he was legitimately trying, just not everyone outside the disabled community knows. We don't typically use terms like low functioning and high functioning anymore because just like terms like idiot, moron, and the R slur, they were typically used and still are in schools for people who are disabled, typically used to segregate people. In 2008, I was volunteering in a school for people with severe mental disabilities, and they were still using the terms low functioning and high functioning. I was very frustrated in my room because I had 8 kids in my room at the time, and one of them was only partially able to vocalize how she felt. She was incredibly intelligent. I am not kidding. This girl taught herself Spanish on her own, just because she was bored. Taught herself Spanish in the classroom on her downtime. She was very, very bright. But she had schizophrenia, ADHD, and autism, and because she wasn't able to speak the way I am right now, constantly, they classed her as low functioning in 2008 and threw her into my room with people who needed diaper changing, who couldn't always walk on their own, who had seizures, who were unable to speak, who were unable to feed themselves, and she did not belong in that room. All year we advocated to get her out of that room. We were like, she's not in danger, but she doesn't belong here. She is not getting anything out of being in this room. She needs structure. She needs to have the opportunity to actually learn in a classroom setting. She can handle it. And it took until almost summer break for them to finally listen to us and put her in a different room that was more suited to her individual needs. All of this because when they sat down to talk to her, sometimes she spoke and sometimes she just went, instead. That's all it took to class her as basically being a moron in their eyes. A school in 2008. Now, as a disabled person on a tour of Pennhurst, one of the first things that I did notice, although people, of course, tried to act like they always do, like nothing strange was going on, was there was ableism, unfortunately. Now, my wheelchair is quite low to the ground. Generally speaking, I am watching the floor when I am using it. I need to watch out for your legs and feet because it can't stop right away. It is a power chair. I need to make sure I'm not about to run somebody over. So when people are talking around me, I can't always see who it is. There was a crowd of people. I believe he said there were at least 50 of us. Someone behind me right before the tour began was laughing at the fact that currently my wheelchair has duct tape on it. There's a couple reasons for it. One reason is because a part has broken on it. It is a part I cannot easily access and buy a new one of. It's going to take a lot more than that to repair it. I currently do not have the time nor the funds nor the ability to find a person to fix this part of my wheelchair. It's easier to just duct tape it. No one has ever said anything about it until I was at Pennhurst, and these people knew damn well that I would have been here, and they were making comments about it. Another reason is just, it's my chair. I can do what I want with it. I'm purposely looking for colorful duct tape and washi tape to make it look more interesting. You gonna laugh at it then? It was just wildly inappropriate that someone was visiting a facility where they realized people like me would have been thrown when it was open, and that many of us wouldn't have lasted a year in that facility because of how much neglect and abuse was going on there. And she still had the audacity to make a comment like that. Now, to the credit of the staff members of Pennhurst, I met quite a few security guards, overnight security guards at Pennhurst during my time there, and of course I was talking to the tour guide quite a lot. All of them said, if you manage to capture that woman on video, or if you manage to figure out who it was that said it, please tell us. She will be kicked out immediately. We do not stand for that here. We do not accept ableism at Pennhurst anymore, knowing the history, and I truly appreciate that, because usually all you get is someone either kind of accidentally victim blaming you, like, well, why didn't you pipe up? Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you do something? I didn't say or do anything at the time because I couldn't tell who was saying it, and because I was trying to not run over a bunch of people from like ghost hunters and stuff. That's why. You don't always have the opportunity to speak up in the moment. And honestly, it's kind of sad to admit, but as someone who has been visibly disabled for several years now, I am so used to tuning people like that out at this point. Like, it happens all the time, everywhere. Every time people think they're sly, they think they're being quiet and they're not going to be caught, I can hear you. Other people can hear you. But I do appreciate that the staff members were like, yeah, if anybody says or does anything, we will escort them out immediately. The other thing that I couldn't help but notice during the tour is every so often when our tour guide got really specific, painfully specific about the torment that people went through, that they were medically experimented on, that they would just get left at the train tracks by their parents with a sign saying that they needed their kid to live here now, that, like I said, they were treated as not being human beings. And horror stories of how the staff treated people because the ratio of staff members to, honestly, I'd call them inmates there, was horrifying. That like one person would have to watch pretty much an entire floor of people. Like, you're gonna be exhausted. And that's something that was brought to our attention, that yes, what happened to the patients there was terrible, but that you can't entirely blame the staff members because they were underpaid, overworked, and they had way too many people to watch at the same time, which I do agree with. I do understand that it is terrible that Pennhurst treated them that way, but at the same time, again, as someone who has seen low-grade versions of this in my real life, get another job then. Leave that facility if you think it's that bad. And you're telling me during the entire time Pennhurst was operational. Not a single staff member who was like, we aren't treated well here either. The people here aren't being treated well who are patients. This is awful. Not a single one of them thought to quit their job and go to the police or report it to the news or something. I'm sorry, but there is just simply no excuse for that. No matter how exhausted you are, there is no excuse for saying nothing. In saying nothing, you're just as bad as the people perpetuating the pain going on there. Silence is violence when it comes to marginalized people. Something else that I noticed very, very quickly during just the tour itself, but the entire time I was at Pennhurst, was ironically, when you think about the fact that physically disabled people were here and there were entire buildings where people who were immobile would live, it's extremely inaccessible. The outer grounds, like before you're inside any of the buildings, have a lot of rocks. The pavement is very heavily cracked. There are potholes everywhere and bumps and grooves that my wheelchair was getting stuck on and my wheels were rolling. I will say it was already difficult enough as someone in a power chair trying to get around. The amount of times that I got stuck and my wheels just rolled and I needed to push out. Unbelievable. If you go there in a manual wheelchair, make sure you bring someone with you who is able to help push you, because if I had gone there in my manual wheelchair, I'd have been exhausted almost immediately because of the amount of stones on the grounds. Like, you're gonna get trapped in a manual, even more so than in a power chair. It is rough there. And inside the buildings is no better. So the kind of package that we got, we were there for Paracon. So what we did was we had one that allowed us to have a tour of the facility. Then we had a panel with a bunch of paranormal investigators the night after that. And then we were able to investigate some of the buildings that a lot of people have investigated, as well as buildings that have never been investigated before by the general public. And then there was Paracon itself. So as soon as the panel was done, we were doing our paranormal investigation. And yeah, it was tough. I was absolutely terrified because when we first got there and they needed to do the body scan and stuff, because people were actually trying to bring their guns in, they didn't know what to do. This was the event staff. The event staff were different people than the people who are employees of Pennhurst. I want to make that very clear. The event staff were like, oh, you have to go up a flight of stairs in order to get scanned and in order to get your ticket in. And I was like, how? And they said they're kind of walking back and forth trying to get a hold of their superiors nonstop for a good 5 minutes while I tried to stay out of the way of other people. In front of at least 100 people, they were like, we don't know what to do, so we're going to have to carry you in. And I was like, what? And I was like, you're sure there's not a ramp? I don't mind if I have to travel a little out of the way. Is there a ramp I can take instead? And they were like, no, we can't find a ramp that you can access. We're going to have to carry you in. So 2 guys got on the front of my wheelchair, which is only 45 pounds, and 2 got on the back. They lifted it up with me in it and carried it up a flight of very old stairs. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And having all those eyes on you while that's happening is very dehumanizing. And one of them smiled afterwards and was like, oh yeah, that's what we would do if you ever came to the haunt. We just carry people into the haunt when it's on. Come to find out, during the tour, I realized before anyone even said anything who was Pennhurst staff, I was like, Kara, because my fiance was there with me. The end of this tour is taking place where the tickets were scanned. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, so the entire time I could have just gone behind the buildings and not been carried in my wheelchair. And she was like, seems that way. The event staff at a facility for disabled people hadn't even bothered to figure out a route to get people in wheelchairs in and out of the tour and in and out of the investigation. Now, the overnight security were amazing people. Every one of them. They knew exactly what to do. They were able to instantly find what ramps would get me to each building. And after showing me, like, basically there's like one that kind of attaches to everything and you just kind of go behind instead of in front of certain buildings. After showing me the basic route, they left me alone, completely independent, to go wherever I pleased, and I truly appreciated that. Unfortunately, the buildings that were open to investigation for us that night were the Quaker building that the general public had never been allowed to investigate before, so that was very special. The Devon building, which is known as one of the most haunted buildings on the entire grounds, the Mayflower, and Limerick. I spent most of my time in Quaker. Quaker was very easily accessible to me because although there is, I believe, an upstairs and downstairs to that building, the main floor that I got to from the ramp was quite spacious, and I had great luck with the investigation there. But Mayflower, there was like one floor I could get to, but most of how people were getting in and out, I got to the door and I was like, am I going to be able to get in here? And they were like, right through that door is a flight of stairs. And I was like, yeah, we're not doing that, bye. Which they were very apologetic, but yeah, like every door that was unlocked for the night, stairs. Devon, I believe, was a similar problem. So we were like, let's go to Limerick. Go to Limerick. There's just one security guard sitting there, and then a flight of stairs. But luckily, we got on really well and made friends with that security guard, and we had a lot of luck actually in that little, like, I guess, lobby type area with our investigation. So it wasn't a total loss. We just kind of made the best of the hand we were dealt for that night. But yeah, unfortunately, it is very inaccessible. And later on, when I was talking to some of the security guards I made friends with and with our tour guide, they were like, yeah, it is very darkly ironic that this place is extremely inaccessible. But one of the things that changed my mind from being offended that this place is a tourist destination now and that is a haunted house is when I was told why those things exist there. That the man who currently owns Pennhurst, who I got to meet and is an absolutely wonderful human being, like, he's rich the right way. The man who owns it wants to restore it. He doesn't want it to die to time. Unfortunately, some of the old buildings have already had to get knocked down and are gone forever. We'll never see them again. He doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want that history to become erased one day and forgotten by people. So he's realized that unfortunately the best way to fundraise and to earn the money that is needed to keep the currently standing buildings restored is the haunted house and things like Paracon. People pay maybe a few dollars here and there if you just do a general fundraiser or ask for donations online. But when they get something out of it, when they can buy merchandise, when they're going to be entertained, they're more likely to spend a few $100 that night. So I was like, you know what? Knowing that, it makes more sense. And they explained several times, we're uncomfortable with it too. We feel bad about the fact that we've turned into a tourist destination, that we've turned into something entertaining and a place where people are laughing and having fun, because the patients here were never allowed to leave, for the most part. Most of them never got to leave. They lived and died here and were tormented here, and it's really difficult when you're having fun in a haunted house to think about the fact that that's what happened to people here. And they acknowledge that, but they're like, but whenever we feel bad about that, we think about the fact that doing that is what is keeping that history alive and keeping people from forgetting and thinking that it is nothing but a tourist destination. It's what's helping them to put on the tours and pay the employees who educate people when they get there. And yeah, even outside the tours, people need to get educated. Unfortunately, on Saturday night, apparently someone had gone into Limerick and they were pounding on the walls. They were screaming at the spirits, demanding that they make themselves known. And our security guard friend Sam that we met there, who is absolutely wonderful person, I can't wait to see her again because I am planning on going back. She kicked them out. She was like, if you are coming here and you're gonna disrespect the buildings, the grounds, or the spirits, you are not welcome here. And they are very no bullshit about it. They will escort you out immediately and you will not be welcome back. Which brings me to something else that I was given permission to talk about because it's something I haven't seen people discuss. So, ghost adventures. It was brought up a lot on the tour, during the investigation with the security guards, and during Paracon. Ghost Adventures was not there. They're pretty much the only popular or famous investigation team that has not been invited back to Pennhurst, because literally every single employee and the owner fucking hate Zach Bagans. And there's a couple reasons that I am about to drop a big truth bomb on. First reason, when Zach was talking about the Quaker building, he was given proper information about what happened in the Quaker building. So he had been immediately made aware of that. He still chose to instead make it sensational and make it sound like it was Arkham fucking Asylum. He chose to make it sound terrifying and like the people there were dangerous and evil and scary and that there were demons in that building that were gonna hurt him. He further stigmatized a building of people who were treated in some of the worst ways while Pennhurst was open. He took the people who were victimized the most on those grounds and chose to turn them into demons on his incredibly famous and incredibly well-viewed show. They're pretty pissed about that, and rightfully so. Something else that they don't like about Zach is the fact that he was very disrespectful to the spirits. He screamed at them. He made demands of them. He treated them like they were all demons and they were all bad people that he needed to basically kick out of their home. And something that the staff of Pennhurst will always remind you of when you're investigating there is the fact that even if you mean well, even if your intentions are good and you're like, oh, I just want to free their spirit from this difficult place, remember that for many people, this was their home. It is not up to us to determine whether or not someone should be still residing at Pennhurst as a spirit. It is not up to us to decide whether or not someone's spirit should be released from a certain place. And this doesn't just happen at Pennhurst. I've had to stop watching certain paranormal YouTubers because they do this same shit in graveyards, in haunted houses, in old abandoned asylums, everywhere, that they're just like, oh, go toward the light, oh, do this, oh, do that. And it's like, to me, it feels like, okay, think of it in terms of if this person was still alive. They're not a ghost, it's a living person. You went into an apartment complex and was like, the standards of this apartment complex are pretty rough. It looks like they haven't done maintenance here. There's cracks in the wall, like there's plumbing issues. I feel bad. I am now going to evict every single person in this apartment complex because I feel bad for them because they have to live here, and then I'm going to try to get it demolished or abandoned, condemned so no one else can come here. You just displaced all those people and they don't know where to go. I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, but you don't know what happens after we die. None of us do. We can speculate, we can have belief in a certain religion, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, you have no proof of what happens after we die. You are assuming they're going to go someplace good. But what if, in doing that, when you say go toward the light, you're actually causing them to go through a portal or something and get lost in a place they've never been, where their spirits are terrified now and trapped to a new place that they don't recognize, where all of their friends are now gone, all the people they've been familiar with for decades, sometimes centuries, those people are all gone now. Some of the spirits we met knew who Sam was. They love her. They call her mom. And you're trying to evict them from a place that they're happy now. They may have suffered when they were alive there. They may have hated living there when they were alive there. But for some of them, this place is now home in a way it never was when they were alive because of the employees who care for them now. We need to kind of ego check ourselves sometimes as paranormal investigators and understand that it is not necessarily our job to kick someone out of a space. Now for the final reason they hate Zach Bagans, he fucking stole from them. Have you ever been to Zach's Paranormal Museum in Las Vegas? If you have, I'm sure that they've talked to you about the dentist chair from Pennhurst. He fucking stole it. The employees and the owner of Pennhurst make it abundantly clear while you're there, if they even catch you picking up a stone and putting it in your pocket, you will be kicked out. They don't want you taking souvenirs. You're not allowed to be taking anything with you that is there. It doesn't matter if it looks insignificant. Don't take gifts people have left. Don't take their paranormal equipment. Don't take pictures that are like hung up on the wall. Don't take stones or bricks. It's not yours to take, and they don't appreciate that. He says that Pennhurst donated that dentist chair. They didn't. He stole it, and he has refused to give it back. Numerous times, the owner of Pennhurst and the employees of Pennhurst have told him he needs to give it back and said, you need to return this item. It is not okay that you have this. We never authorized you taking this off of the grounds. Give it back. And he has chosen to ignore them. To the extent that some of the overnight security members I made friends with have even told me they have considered voluntarily driving there and taking it back because it wouldn't be stealing. He stole it. It is theirs to take back. So yeah, a couple of them, Sam and her husband, have said they want to go to Vegas to take the chair back because it was never his to begin with. And any shred of respect a lot of people had for Zach Bagans was out the window when they heard that. And it should be. You do not take shit. Not just because it can be dangerous, because a dark spirit can be attached to it, not just because a kindly spirit can be attached to it and now they're confused and lost, but because it is not yours. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the investigation itself.